The revolution is real, it's live, and as some comrades say, it's lit, right? lit. Real, live, lit. Right? The revolution is lit.
Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, live with the leader of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akile Anai, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. Today's study is themed Anti-Semitism, a weapon against African and Palestinian freedom struggles. The term anti-Semitism has long been used as an attack against the African and Palestinian liberation movement, as a way to prevent the just criticism of colonizer Jews based on their historic attacks against the African community inside the US and its participation in the looting of Africa's resources, as well as for challenging the legitimacy of the Israeli settler colonial state in occupied Palestine. Such slanderous characterization has resulted in jailings in certain places, career and livelihood destruction and cancellation, bannings from public speaking arenas, added to the anti-defamation list, etc. We see its use today as Palestine wages its just struggle to end colonialism. We see it used to target anti-colonial free speech and solidarity with Palestinian and African liberation. To discuss the use of this anti-Semitic designation further, we have our special guest, Jesse Nevel, chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the mass organization of white people assigned to go and organize other colonizers to stand in solidarity with the African Revolution under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, expressed through reparations to African people and the anti-colonial economic institutions of the Uhuru movement. Jesse was also one of the members raided by the FBI in 2022 and makes up one of the Uhuru Three. He is also Jewish and represents the stance that all colonizer Jews must take to abandon their own bourgeoisie and stand with the anti-colonial freedom struggles around the world. We'll have a comprehensive overview from Comrade Jesse, then turn it over to the leader of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, to deepen this discussion. We'll then move to announcements and some questions and answers before closing. Before we start, make sure to share this study far and wide. Take a moment right now to like this video, tag your friends, subscribe to the YouTube channel and to Chairman Omali's Twitch channel. And as they work hard to censor us, going as far as attempting to lock Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru Three behind bars for what we say, we have to push back to force the truth out into the world. And that's why we call on you to play an active role today, right now, during this study, to simply share this video, tag a friend, subscribe to our pages. This is an act of resistance. We have a right to this information that they're fighting hard to keep from us. Once we have this information, we have the responsibility to share it with others who need it. So hashtag shared, hashtag liked, and hashtag reposted in the comments and let us know where you are tuning in from. So thank you for your participation and pushing back against censorship, fighting for the right to anti-colonial free speech. So let's welcome now our first guest, Comrade Jesse Nevel. Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Director Akile, for that powerful opening of this important episode of Omali Taught Me. I want to salute you, Director Akile, and the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, and express what a profound honor it is to be here to participate in this study led by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is here in the Uhuru House now with us, and very honored to be here with the chairman. And want to salute the African People's Socialist Party, salute the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela, and also as a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, salute my direct leadership, the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess. And as I mentioned, I am honored to be a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and the chair of our mass organization, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the organization of white people formed by and working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, with the strategic assignment to go into the white community behind enemy lines, into the colonizer population, and win other white people like ourselves to join the African Revolution in a principled relationship of solidarity with the struggle for African self-determination, and to fight for reparations to African people as a revolutionary anti-colonial demand. And I acknowledge that as a participant in this study today in Omali Taught Me, as the name suggests, everything that I will be presenting in this presentation, all of these understandings are derived from the political theory of African internationalism developed by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party over the past 50 years, and through my participation in the African People's Solidarity Committee under the leadership of Chairwoman Penny Hess, and that it would be impossible for any white person to come to these understandings on our own without the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, without the theory of African internationalism that enables us to see reality through the lens of the African working class and oppressed peoples of the world, to see the world as it really is. And I want to begin by stating clearly the position of the African People's Socialist Party, which is shared by its constituent organization, the African People's Solidarity Committee and Uhuru Solidarity Movement, that it is the responsibility of all white people, including white Jewish people, to stand in complete and unconditional solidarity with the people of Palestine, who are courageously fighting to resist and to liberate their homeland from over 75 years of settler colonial occupation by the US-backed illegitimate white nationalist colonial settler state of Israel, that we stand opposed to the illegitimate colonial settler state of Israel, built on the theft of the land from the Palestinian people, built on the genocide and expulsion of the Palestinian people from their land, and that we recognize, as the chairman has said, as Chairwoman Penny Hess has said, that we cannot walk over the bodies of African people, indigenous people, those who are colonized within the colonial borders of the US, in the Palestine right here, in order to express our outrage at what the same system is doing thousands of miles away. That genuine solidarity with the Palestinian struggle begins with the stand of solidarity with the African Revolution inside the US and around the world. And one specific action that white Jewish people in particular must take towards that end is to publicly denounce the US and Israeli ruling classes when they use the concept of quote unquote anti-Semitism to attack, silence African and Palestinian and other oppressed peoples when they oppose Israel, US imperialism, or colonialism as a whole. The use of this weaponization of the term anti-Semite has intensified in this recent period with the rise of Palestinian resistance, with the exposing of the atrocities of the state of Israel before the eyes of the peoples of the world, where billions of people have come out to demonstrate their unity with the Palestinian struggle. In this era, the false cry of anti-Semite has never been louder or more shrill. It is more than just a name calling, an act of name calling. It is something that can have serious and dire consequences. Just recently, the US House of Representatives passed a resolution which was voted in almost unanimously. There were only 2 representatives of the US Congress, one of them being Rashida Tlaib, who's the only Palestinian in the US Congress, who voted against it. The resolution was condemning what they call anti-Semitism. And it was a resolution equating opposition to Israel with anti-Semitism. It was a resolution equating belief in that Israel does not have the right to exist with anti-Semitism. In other words, it is official policy of the US government that if you disagree with the existence of the Israeli colonial settler state built on stolen, occupied Palestinian land, which has, for the past nearly 2 months in view of the whole world, flattened entire neighborhoods in Gaza with bombs and cut off oxygen to Palestinian children and babies screaming from their hospital beds in neonatal ICUs, then you must not like Jewish people. According to the logic of this US House resolution, there is something Jewish in their view about killing babies and children, because if you are against it, you must not like Jews. On November 16th of this year, the German police raided 54 locations across the country, targeting a Muslim organization that they say was involved in, quote, promoting the ideology of Iran and supporting the resistance movement in Lebanon called Hezbollah. On November 21st, the German police raided the homes of 17 people, accusing them of, quote unquote, posting anti-Semitic hate speech on social media, which included messages in support of the Palestinian resistance. In France and in England, cities have banned pro-Palestinian demonstrations and outlawed even the utterance of the words, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Students for Justice in Palestine and even chapters of Jewish Voice for Peace have been suspended and disbanded at universities across the United States, including Columbia University, on the grounds of promoting anti-Semitism. In Florida, the governor, Ron DeSantis, has called for all chapters of Students for Justice in Palestine at universities throughout the state to be completely disbanded. Since October 7th, the state of Israel itself has arrested at least 100 Arab people living inside Israel for social media posts supporting Palestinians in Gaza, 70 of which are still in jail. In Los Angeles, California, 2 Mexican educators affiliated with Unión del Barrio are being sued by Zionists for promoting anti-Semitism because of their inclusion of Palestine in their ethnic studies curriculum. Unión del Barrio will be holding a demonstration in LA at the courthouse where this case will be heard on December 14th. And historically, the US colonial ruling class has always used the weapon of anti-Semite to slander and attack the African liberation movement, which has always stood in profound unity with the Palestinian anti-colonial struggle. In 1964, Malcolm X visited the Gaza Strip and published an essay in the Egyptian Gazette titled The Zionist Logic, in which he placed the struggle of the Palestinians in the broader context of the struggle by Africans and all oppressed peoples for liberation from colonialism. Malcolm X's stance influenced the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, of which Chairman Omali Yeshitela was a member, which became the first major organization of its time to champion the struggle of the Palestinians. In response, the white left and liberals attacked the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, accusing them of anti-Semitism, and many Jewish donors withdrew their financial support. More recently, we saw the African People's Education and Defense Fund come under attack by the Pinellas County Commission, which revoked grant funds that had been allotted for Black Power 96 radio in St. Petersburg, Florida, saying that they were denying the funds on the basis that APEDF was allegedly affiliated with the Uhuru movement, which they characterized as a, quote, Black nationalist anti-Semitic organization. And most importantly, you have the long history of attacks on Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who has been characterized repeatedly by the Anti-Defamation League as a so-called anti-Semite. And in 2020, the chairman was scheduled to speak at a conference on reparations at San Diego State University before he was disinvited from speaking after Zionist student organizations, including Hillel, which is funded by the Israeli government, intervened and attacked the chairman, stating that he was a, quote, anti-Semite because of comments he had made about 10 years earlier Ironically, comments in which he made a positive call to Jewish people to stand in solidarity with the struggle of the Palestinians. And I will be concluding this presentation by quoting to you those powerful words from the chairman. As the chairman teaches us, acknowledging that anti-Semitism or Jewish victimhood is weaponized against colonized peoples does not require a dismissal of the actual history of the oppression of Jewish people. Yes, Jews have been oppressed historically in Europe at the hands of other Europeans, most notoriously in what is often referred to as the Nazi Holocaust, the destruction of millions of European Jews in the 1930s and 40s by the German government. What is in question is not this history, but the way in which this event has been abstracted from history altogether and converted into ideological ammunition for Zionism and colonialism. Indeed, the Zionists and the US ruling class have always held up the mass murder of Jews by Nazi Germany as the primary justification for the creation of the settler colonial state of Israel. An explanation that makes no sense and leaves no answer to the obvious question, why should Palestinian Arabs have to pay for the crimes of white people in Germany? As Chairman Omali Yeshitela has stated, it was white people who put Jews in gas chambers, not Africans, Iranians, or Arabs. The Nazi Holocaust is elevated in the colonial narrative to be the ultimate crime ever committed by one group of human beings against another. This is central to the colonial ruling class's deployment of Jewish victimhood as a weapon against the anti-colonial struggle. If the Nazi Holocaust is the worst atrocity in human history, and nothing else can even compare, and you cannot and should not even use the word genocide to refer to anything else, lest you somehow diminish the uniquely monumental horror of the capital H Holocaust trademark, then everything else that colonialism has done and is doing to African, indigenous, Arab, and colonized peoples for hundreds of years is obscured, muted, and normalized. Before the Nazi persecution of the Jews, there was no word even in the English language for genocide. It wasn't until after the Nazi persecution of European Jews, when the United Nations adopted a legal definition for genocide in 1948, which had been authored by a Polish Jew named Raphael Lemkin. As we have stated before, there was no word for genocide when over 12 million Africans were slaughtered in Congo under King Leopold of Belgium, when the indigenous people of this land were exterminated and forced into concentration camps, when Germany, with support of German Jews, was exterminating nearly the entire Herero and Nama population of Namibia in the early 1900s, when Africans throughout this country were being lynched in broad daylight for over 100 years. And even Raphael Lemkin himself opposed the use of the word genocide to define the conditions of African people in the United States, and accused Paul Robeson and others who brought such a charge before the United Nations of functioning as agents of a criminal Russian conspiracy, precisely resembling the bogus charges waged against Chairman Omali Yeshitela. As the chairman explains, such a distortion of history takes the Jewish experience out of the context of the colonial mode of production, which was responsible for the killing of 6 million Jews in the first place, placing Jews in a dangerous and precarious position separate from the rest of humanity. There is even a variant of this notion now trending among some Jewish leftists and liberals who are critics of Israel, who say that the only way you can understand Israel's barbaric treatment of the Palestinians is to recognize that the Jews in Israel are informed by the trauma of the past, the trauma of the Nazi Holocaust, and that they are transferring this trauma onto the Palestinians. No explanation is given for why this transference of trauma could not have been aimed at, say, the Germans instead of the Palestinians, who were entirely uninvolved in the Nazi Holocaust. Because it wasn't the Nazi Holocaust or trauma that drove a sector of European Jews to colonize the land of Palestine, beginning in the early 1900s, and to eventually slaughter and expel nearly 1 million Palestinians in the Nakba period of 1947 to 1949. It was colonialism. Zionism, the belief in a Jewish colonial settler state existing on stolen, occupied Palestinian land, at the expense of genocide against the Palestinians, was an ideological project founded by secular, atheist, petty bourgeois European Ashkenazi Jews, not to heal the trauma of Jewish suffering, but to advance the interests of European Jews within the colonial mode of production built on the backs of African people. Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern political Zionism, was very candid about this. To him, Zionism was above all a colonial project. Among those he admired greatly was the British imperialist Cecil Rhodes, whose famous statement when witnessing the poverty of the English workers in the working class quarters was, "We must become imperialists." Theodor Herzl took this to heart. Herzl actually wrote to Cecil Rhodes in 1902, requesting his support for the Zionist project. He said, quote, "You are being invited to help make history. It doesn't involve Africa, but a piece of Asia Minor. Not Englishmen, but Jews. Had this been on your path, you would have done it by now. How then do I happen to turn to you, since this is an out-of-the-way matter for you? How indeed, because it is something colonial," Herzl said. The establishment of Israel was something colonial indeed, involving Jewish terrorist organizations forcing the expulsion of nearly 800,000 Palestinians, the mass murder of 15,000, the destruction of hundreds of villages, theft of land, and forcing Palestinians into concentration camps in the so-called occupied territories. The early Zionist movement sought support from every major imperialist white power government of that era, including the Kaiser of Germany, the same Germany that was committing genocide against Africans in Namibia between 1904 and 1908. Eventually, the Zionist movement found its primary backer in the form of the British Empire, and ultimately the United States became the main imperial power, sponsoring and funding the Zionist entity. But the fact of the matter is that despite the fact that the Zionists uphold the Nazi Holocaust as the primary justification for the existence of Israel, the reality is that the Zionists were more than willing to sacrifice the Jews of Europe in the interests of establishing their aim of creating a white nationalist colonial settler state on stolen Palestinian land. Despite their false claims to be the place of refuge for the Jews of Europe, the Zionist movement repeatedly collaborated with the Nazi government. And there's this idea that the Zionist movement, and the state of Israel came about after the Nazi extermination of Jews to save the Jews of Europe. But the Nazi government and the Zionist movement existed during the same time. And the Zionist movement was not involved in trying to create resistance to the Zionists were not involved in trying to support the resistance to the Nazis. And that was not the position they took, nor were they really interested in any so-called immigration policies that would have involved the rescue of Jews from the Nazi government. In fact, this is a book called The Hidden History of Zionism by Ralph Schoenman, probably mispronouncing that, but I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just to quickly quote from it, he says that the Zionist Federation of Germany sent a memorandum of support to the Nazi Party on June 21st, 1933, stating, "A rebirth of national life such as is occurring in German life must also take place in the Jewish national group." The World Zionist Organization in 1933 defeated a resolution calling for action against Hitler by a vote of 240 to 43. And it goes on to talk about how the Zionists and the Nazi government created a trade agreement through the Anglo-Palestine Bank, which was a bank in Palestine run by the Zionists that received monies from the German Jewish bourgeoisie, with which sums Nazi goods were purchased in very substantial quality. The World Zionist Organization became the principal distributor of Nazi goods throughout the Middle East and Northern Europe. It goes on to talk about how even infamous Nazis like Eichmann actually visited Palestine in the mandatory period to meet with the Zionists in the 1930s. And this is, to me, one of the most remarkable quotes. This is from David Ben-Gurion, who was the first prime minister of Israel and one of the architects of the Nakba and the Zionist colonization of Palestine, there was attempts being made to change the immigration laws of the United States and Western Europe, and it was the Zionists who actively organized to stop those efforts. And Ben-Gurion informed a meeting of labor Zionists in Great Britain in 1938. He said, "If I knew it would be possible to save all the children in Germany by bringing them over to England and only half of them by bringing them to Israel, I would opt for the second." So he's essentially saying, I would let half of the Jewish children of Germany die if it could mean getting the other half over to Israel to help colonize Palestine. So this is pretty clear what the position was. And the last quote from here that I'd like to read is, this says that the Zionists sought bodies with which to colonize Palestine and preferred Jewish corpses in their millions to any rescue that might settle Jews elsewhere. If ever a people could be expected to grasp the meaning of persecution, the pain of being perpetual refugees, and the humiliation of slander, it ought to have been the Jews. In place of compassion, the Zionists celebrated the persecution of others, even as they first betrayed the Jews and then degraded them. They selected a victim people of their own on whom to inflict a conquering design. They aligned the surviving Jews with a new genocide against the Palestinian people, cloaking themselves with savage irony in the collective shroud of the Holocaust. So I want to close by saying that as the African People's Solidarity Committee, under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, we believe it is time for Jewish people to say, never again will we be collaborators with our own ruling class, that it is time to break ranks, defect, and let the Zionists have to fend for themselves. Refuse to let them twist and pervert the memory of Jews killed in Europe with blood-stained hands that they used to strangle and kill the Palestinian people. Through the relationship of the African People's Solidarity Committee to the African People's Socialist Party, we can take responsibility for our history of complicity, and we can say, no more genocide in our name. We can make our self-criticism, join in solidarity with the oppressed peoples of the world. We're fighting to build a future without oppression and exploitation. Over 20 years ago, in the book Overturning the Culture of Violence, Chairwoman Penny Hess wrote, "Where are the Jews who will use their experience in Nazi Germany as an opportunity to stand in solidarity with African and oppressed peoples of the world?" Now is the time to answer that question. We are encouraged to see many Jews today turning their backs against Israel, even calling themselves for the first time anti-Zionists. Even Jews in Israel who are refusing to enlist in the military and who are being thrown in jail for that. Under the leadership of the party, the African People's Solidarity Committee and USM is for every Jew who wants to stand against Zionism, which means standing against colonialism. As Chairman Omali Yeshitela explains, contained in the particular contradiction of the horror of what is happening in Gaza today is the universal contradiction of the colonial mode of production, as the chairman calls it, which has at its center the historic and ongoing oppression of African people. And therefore, at its center, the center of overturning it will be the liberation and self-determination of African people. So Jewish people who stand for Palestine must stand against colonialism, must stand for reparations to African people and in solidarity with the African Revolution under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And I will close this presentation with two passages that I would like to quote from. The first is from the 2017 charter of the Palestinian resistance movement known as Hamas. Hamas writes in their 2017 charter, quote, "Hamas affirms that its conflict is with the Zionist project, not with the Jews because of their religion. Hamas does not wage a struggle against the Jews because they are Jewish, but wages a struggle against the Zionists who occupy Palestine. Yet it is the Zionists who constantly identify Judaism and the Jews with their own colonial project and illegal entity. Hamas is of the view that the Jewish problem, anti-Semitism, and the persecution of the Jews are phenomena fundamentally linked to European history and not to the history of the Arabs or the Muslims or to their heritage, end quote. And finally, these are the words for which Chairman Omali Yeshitela was banned by Zionists from speaking at San Diego State University. I think it was in 2007 or 2008, the chairman said, however many Jews were killed in Germany, they, white people, killed them. They were not killed by Iranians. They were killed by white people in Europe. I truly believe that Jewish people have a responsibility to denounce the illegitimate state of Israel, to express solidarity with the just struggles of the Palestinians and other oppressed peoples. What killed the Jews was capitalism and other white people in Germany and other places. And more recently, the chairman said, Jews need to turn against the sector of their bourgeoisie that claims to represent the interests of all Jewish people and join with the struggles of the colonized peoples of the world. So we say, join the African People's Solidarity Committee, join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, free Palestine, and victory to the African Revolution. Uhuru.
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 Uhuru, comrade. Uhuru, comrade Jesse Nevel. That was Chair Jesse Nevel, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and again, one of the Uhuru Three. And I just really want to appreciate you for taking us through this overview and showing clearly how far the colonizer will go to crush revolutionary struggle. And it's really important that we were able to raise this question. And when you look at, an anti-defamation league, for instance, with regard to anti-Semitism, there's nothing that exists when it comes to the white nationalist attacks against African people in the US and throughout the world. And, it's clear that you have a right to hate and slander a slave, but you do not have the right to stand in solidarity with one and to end the system of slavery, to end the colonial mode of production. This is the statement that, the colonial ruling class continues to make, through the weaponization of anti-Semitism. So thank you so much, Chair Jesse, again, for that brilliant presentation. And I'm excited to deepen this discussion with none other than the leader of the African Revolution, who's been heavily quoted, up until now, the theoretician behind African internationalism, which allows us to see and explain the world this way. As mentioned, has been slandered repeatedly throughout his history of organizing for African freedom, slandered with this characterization. So I would like to welcome up now, my honor to welcome up Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to you, Comrade Director Akile Anai, to all other participants in this study. And as usual, I want to especially extend that to areas of the African world that has suffered now for hundreds of years, to the extent that the resources stolen from Africa to make Europe rich, to make Israel rich, has impoverished us and has sucked from our grasp infrastructure that would allow us to participate in discussions like this with ease, especially having access to the resources that have come from Africa to make it possible for the colonizers of the world to have this discussion. I especially want to express appreciation to our brothers and sisters and comrades on the continent of Africa, and those comrades and brothers and sisters in the Caribbean who, again, in many instances, have to come together collectively and have group viewing and group discussions to participate in these studies. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think the presentation that was just provided to us, first with the overview from you, Comrade Director Akile, was extremely important, and Comrade Jesse continues to develop our position around this issue of anti-Semitism and how it is a tool, a weapon that is used against oppressed people, against Africans in particular, and certainly against Palestinians at this moment. I want to say that part of what this discussion helps us to understand, or brings out in bold relief, this whole notion of free speech and how ridiculous it is, because the colonized do not have the right of free speech. We do not never have had the right of free speech since colonialism has come into existence. And in fact, what we see is the notion of free speech is something that's used against the colonized to advocate for the oppression and extermination of colonized people. I remember that struggle that occurred in Paris when this magazine, Something Charlie, had to put forth most offensive kinds of visuals, cartoons, lampooning, and just desecrating Islamic Muslim religion and the Prophet Muhammad, and how the assault on that left some of the perpetrators of that slander and aggression dead. They were killed, and they were said that the slanderers were actually exercising their right to free speech in France. Therefore, the assault on them was something that was against free speech as well. But the truth of the matter is that the Arab, Palestinian, and Muslims of this recent era being since the advent of the colonial mode of production that started with the assault on Africa, the truth is that our existence in most of the world is an oppressive kind of existence. And so when we see what was happening with the slander, with the this attack on the religion, the things that represent the essence of what many Muslims and Arabs would characterize as their identity. This is an ongoing consequence of conquest, of colonial conquest, that even in the territories that call themselves benefiting or exercising free speech, the slave, the colonized, the ones who came into this relationship not because of free will, but because of conquest, have no right to exercise free speech. And when we fight back against this aggression, against certain expressions of this horror, of colonialism, then we are characterized as horrible forces who are also working against the free speech of civilized Europe, in this instance, civilized France. You look at the situation here as a further example of what I'm talking about, is that in the United States, in particular, baseball teams and football teams and things like that named for indigenous peoples, that not only named for indigenous people, in most instances, caricaturize the indigenous people. These are people who suffered colonial conquest. And so to oppose this and in defense of the right of the colonizer to slander and ridicule the colonized, this is being characterized as something that is an assault on the free speech of the colonizers, of the murderers, of the people who have put us in this situation. In 1960 and 1966, I was arrested in St. Petersburg, Florida, because the white people there had a mural on the wall of the city hall. This is the local government office that caricatured African people in the same way the Ku Klux Klan or any other white nationalist organization might do. In the same way that the contenders for U.S. president at this moment might do. And I'm saying this based on the kind of things they've had to say, both of them, about, I say both in this instance, I'm talking about the two representing the two dominant political parties, or the dominant political party as in the iterations of Democrat and Republican. So here they are able to put this slanderous image of African people there. It was not just because they don't like Black people. It's not just because they say this is how Black people look or should look. They did it because it's representative of the relationship between white power and Black power. It's to remind everybody, including the colonized, that this is our station. It is a part of an ongoing colonization. So this whole free speech question is bogus. And the colonizer uses the question of free speech in a fashion to justify the ongoing colonial domination of those of us who are colonized. And when we strike out against colonialism, we are being characterized as somebody fighting against the right for free speech. So here we are looking at, there is no such thing as free speech for the oppressed and the colonized. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that, we've seen such examples. I saw this thing of Susan Sarandon, the actor, who spoke at Palestinian rallies in support of Palestinian people. And I really appreciated that, to see someone who has achieved a certain kind of legitimate stature as far as the system is involved and has become a certain kind of cultural icon. Some people had seen her symbolic of the strength of women, in terms of roles that she's used and she's portrayed in movies and things like that. So she stands up and she speaks in defense of Palestinian people, and she talks about how that Jews in the United States are now getting a sense of what it is finally for Muslims, how Muslims must feel based on treatment here in the United States. And so the pushback was extraordinary. She came under fire in a very serious way. Her agency, the agent that represented her, in the movies and things like that, abandoned her, dismissed her, and then along with that, a couple of other artists suffered the same consequence. So I just saw recently she has retracted more or less. She's kind of retreated from that statement, as have most other people who have come out in support of Palestinian people against the genocide, against the murder, against bombing hospitals, against destruction of whole communities, against starving children, against whole communities have the water cut off and the electricity cut off and the ability to get food, starving an entire cities. So some of them have spoken out, had the courage for momentarily to stand up and speak out. And then we've seen them push back because they said something. They've been characterized as anti-Semitic and anti-Semites and things like that. And I've seen that Sarandon, she came forward and she made the statement. She said that she see now just how perhaps insensitive, something to this effect. I'm paraphrasing her. That it was an error because what she said indicated that there is no history of oppression. There has not been this history of oppression of Jews in this country, et cetera. So this notion that somehow they would now find out what it is to be oppressed like the Muslims was something that was a mischaracterization of the history. So she made that statement. She retreated from that. But here's the issue. The African People's Socialist Party, we are materialist. We believe that there is a science of society that has brought us to an understanding of what we characterize as African internationalism. It says something to us about how this existing social system came into existence, how it came into being, the genesis of the social system itself. And that it did not start with what has happened to Europeans, Jews, otherwise. It didn't start there. This existing social system is something that came about as a consequence of an attack that was made on Africa 600 years ago. And I'm not saying there was no oppression and exploitation before that. In fact, people sometimes remind us that that African people were held under that the so-called trans-Saharan slave trade existed for 1,500 years, something like 3 times longer than the transatlantic slave trade. I'm not dismissing that. I'm not saying that that did not occur. What I am saying is that the existing social system did not exist for 1,500 years. This social system that has locked everybody into it, including Arabs, including Muslims, including people, Jews and Europeans and Africans, et cetera, into a single world economy, a single kind of relationship, iterating itself in various ways all around the world. That this thing came into existence when Portugal first attacked Africa some 600 years ago. This is the beginning of this process. This is the thing that created the world economy that we're all locked into. It's a devastating, cruel world economy. It is brutal. And it didn't start with what happened to Jews in Germany. It didn't start at the point where Limpke decided that there should be something defined as genocide. It was pre-genocide in the sense that what we characterize as genocide is something that was utilized, a law that was put forth after the creation of the United Nations, and at a time where the majority of African people did not even have a seat at the United Nations, had no play in the United States. Most of the colonized people didn't. This thing called genocide is relatively recent in terms of the legal definition of it. The war that I'm talking about is one that, according to Walter Rodney, left 100 million African people dead just in the transatlantic slave trade. And some people say it's twice that many Africans who are dead. The war that I'm talking about saw 50 million indigenous people and throughout the Americans killed by the time of Columbus through this, well, not before the time of Columbus, but certainly during this time frame that Columbus, left from the shores of Europe, Portugal, and Spain to come to what is now called the Americas. Before there was an Americas, that people would die. They killed so many indigenous people throughout the Americas that it was responsible for the emergence of what was called a Little Ice Age, where 50 million indigenous people were killed. The war I'm talking about saw countless numbers of Africans and other people, including Arabs, beheaded and heads stuck on stakes in Europe, glorifying in this reality. And the reason we're having this discussion now about this anti-Semitism and what happened to the Jews in the 1940s is because all of that history has been dismissed and liquidated. And standing on the grave, on cemeteries, global cemeteries that were created in the process of building this whole social system. This is this discussion this is the thing that happened with Germany and with Jews. And it's really important to say that because you've seen the thing, I think it was Nevel who made the statement when they came for the trade unions. I didn't say anything because I was not a trade union. They came for the Jews, I didn't, et cetera. And then it goes down the line. When it came for me, nobody said anything. There was nobody left to say anything. Well, Nevel, he started in the wrong place because this German that came up with this statement was there. I mean, he could have said when Jews were Germans, and Germany attacked what's now characterized as Namibia, and the Herero and Nama people were almost destroyed with some of the same persons who were involved in the Jewish Holocaust, involved in killing Africans there. There was nobody saying anything. The Germans didn't say anything. The German Jews didn't say anything. In many ways, participated in what was happening to Africans there. My point is not to cast blame on the Jews or anything like that. The point that I'm making is that the history of this whole thing started a long time ago. As African internationalists, we want to understand how the world got to be the way it is. How it got to kill the Jews, how it got to kill the Palestinians, how it got to this process of creating destruction of indigenous people all around the world. And that was through the emergence of a colonial mode of production that started with Portugal attacking Africa 600 years ago. And the reason is possible to have this kind of discussion today about what happened to Jews in the 1940s, because there's a refusal to talk about what happened to Africans all the time and what happens to us every damn day in public view. And, we read about and we detest the fact of the children being killed by these bombs in Gaza. We detest it. And Africans have always stood next to the Palestinians and next to the Arab Muslim people in Gaza. We've always been there from the very beginning. They killed Malcolm X because of that. They tried to destroy the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee because of that. We have always been there. So there is no question about that. But what has to be recognized is that the fact is that the reason we are having this discussion now about, again, what's happened
with the Palestinians, what's happening with the Jews is because there's been a refusal. There's been a dismissal of the war that's been made against Africa and African people. And that's what we mean when we say, first of all, that this whole issue, the Holocaust, the anti-Semitism, and things like that are used as a cover for all of imperialism, for what is done to the indigenous people here that we live, argue, in the United States as it's characterized now. Indigenous territory, indigenous lands, and what have you, and you can't even see the indigenous people on the streets of this country because they have been disappeared. You want to talk about what has happened? Look at the fact that you've got indigenous people living in concentration camps that they call Indian reservations. There's no protest that comes from the people who the Semites or anybody else around that. Nobody, you don't hear anything happening in the damn synagogues about this deal with what's happening in the concentration camps, because look at what happened to the poor Jews. No, that's not the statement, because it's being used to cover up. Look at what's happening, we said, in Gaza, all the children being killed, and we hate that. But just in St. Louis alone, it's a norm. In St. Louis alone, we have a situation where we have every year enough babies, Black children, die every year during the first year of life to kill 15 kindergarten classes every year. And how much does that total up when you stretch it out, and not just in St. Louis, but all around this country of the United States? So this is happening to us all the time, but it's normal. Right. And so it doesn't get characterized in a certain way, and because we have not redeveloped the African liberation movement to the point now where you have this massive kind of conscious participation in struggle, because they killed Malcolm, because they killed Martin Luther King, because they killed Black Panther Party, because they put me in jail, and everybody who stands for what we stand for. And there is no protest coming from the people now who proclaim that they stand so much for justice and freedom, etc. And that's why they're standing up for this Zionist terror against people in Palestine. So we say this: we are materialists. Jews are people who are subject to the same laws of social development as all other people on the planet Earth. And to the point that Jews allow themselves to be sucked into this process by a sector of the bourgeoisie that controls the world, that isolates them from the rest of humanity. So when they see what is happening by the Zionists murdering all those children, all those people in Palestine, what they see is Jews. Right. And they should not be allowed to see Jews doing it. It's the Zionists who are doing this, the sector of the bourgeoisie who is doing it. When I say Zionists, I don't mean just Jews. I'm talking about Biden, I'm talking about Trump, I'm talking about the whole ruling class, generally speaking, function to perpetuate this crime against the peoples of the world and use this crime as a cover for the offenses they committed against all the other peoples. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So we say, yes, the question is used as a attack. I mean, the Anti-Defamation League has been attacking me since the 1960s. Yep. I've seen them destroy careers. I've seen them take lawyers, the lawyers, their ability to practice law, just take it away from them, have them disbarred and things like that, because they made statements that the Jews found, the Zionists found offensive. So I just think it's really important to recognize that. Africans know this, that every time you look up, used to be, if a Black politician is going to run for office, first thing they had to do to pass the litmus test is announce Mr. Farrakhan. Mm-hmm. You had to pass the litmus test. Does he support Farrakhan? Is Farrakhan all right? Do you support? Can you denounce Farrakhan? In other words, there's a whole determination that Black people cannot have a free expression, that we cannot have agency, we cannot have opinions of our own based on our own reality, etc. That's really important. That's something that's permeated our reality. This is even before what we're looking at now, subsequent to October 7th, when the courageous Palestinian people rose up against all the terror, all the structures that they had created to make sure that the Palestinians live in perpetual poverty and humiliation forever. even before that, we've had this situation with this notion that we could not have agency, that we had to say and denounce anything that suggested that the right of the people to be free and the right of Palestinians to be free, or anything that suggested agency of our own. We had to toe the line. If you don't toe the line, and this is one instance, we're talking now about the whole question of anti-Semitism, but then you can be pro-Russian. You can be all these other things that would justify killing, destroying people's lives and things like that. And then there's this myth, of free speech. So one thing that has to happen, I was in a really important forum maybe 2 weeks ago, and people were discussing this issue of freedom of speech and what was characterized as a new McCarthyism. McCarthy, that was the era when something exploded inside this country, war attack made on people who were alleged to be communist and what have you, and people lost their jobs. And in fact, one person, I think the Rosenbergs, even lost their lives. They were executed because of that. And the point that I wanted to make then is that we have a responsibility to deny this special status that has been conferred upon Jews in this country and in the world. Jews are people.
Yeah. Right.
And we have to rescue them from their bourgeoisie, from the bourgeoisie. I say their bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie. Because the bourgeoisie, the colonial ruling class, would put them in situations where they would have to swim out of Israel in their own blood, out of Palestine. And so the thing is that they don't have to die the fate of the whole colonial mode of production. That's what we're saying. That's part of what it is we're saying. And that they can join in with the rest of us, with the rest of people fighting against colonialism. Some people have been misunderstood colonialism and capitalism. And people tell us that, you got to fight against capitalism. We say that's right, but you can't fight against capitalism without, first of all, going through the colonial question. Yeah. It is upon the colonial mode of production, it's become the backs of the oppressed and colonized peoples of the world that the entire capitalist system exists. It rests upon our backs. And you have a situation where people want to talk all the time about fighting against capitalism, but they'll walk right around desecrated, right around demolished buildings in the cities that they live in. Black people, the Mexican people who are living in children in cages, and walk right around them and to fight their anti-capitalist wars, and not recognizing that the whole thing rests upon the foundation of stolen land, stolen resources, and what the Israelis have done, what the Zionists have done in Palestine is part of course for how the entire system came into being. The greatest settler state in the world is the United States. Yep. And it is spread it throughout the rest of the world. And I just think it's really important to say and to recognize that, that the people can be free, will be free. But we have to demolish this whole notion about special people. Yes. Jews have to reject that too. This is no religious struggle that we're involved in. Nobody's throwing Korans and Bibles and Torahs at each other. This is not a religious struggle. This whole notion, this whole fabrication of a chosen people. So it's somebody's Bible. But it ain't mine. Right. It ain't in the Bible of the Chinese. It ain't, it's just, the chosen people. Chosen by whom? And how does chosen people, it seemed like the real battle, and perhaps it was, because there was a group that was calling itself the master race. And then it was contending with the chosen people, if you look at that logic. But the fact is that we're all people. Yeah. And that we are governed by the same laws of social development. And that's the thing that we have to get to. And if you look at the laws of social development, you find out how capitalism came out of colonialism. came out of selling black people and taking indigenous lands here and around the rest of the world. And somebody's trying to keep us from getting to that discovery by creating this special force of people oppressed like nobody else in human history has ever been oppressed. Hell, Russia lost 27 million people in World War II alone. I mean, if you want to start measuring stuff like that, that's not the question. So I just want to appreciate it and say that this is a really important discussion, and we have to keep fighting it, because there's going to be massive pushbacks, and people have lost their jobs and careers and things like that by calling it out. But we got to call it out, and we have to make it an untenable proposition. That's why it's really important for us to take a scientific approach to this thing, to become materialists. And to become historical materialists, to say this is how this world came into being, and this is what it's going to take to make it go away, and that Jews have the same responsibility as the rest of us to attack this social system, because what is happening is what people have been calling capitalism, how it acts when it hits white people. The fact is, when you saw what happened to Jews in Germany, you were looking at an expression of colonialism, the same colonialism that Germany initiated against African people in Southwest Africa is now visiting upon a sector of the German population that's Jews. So we are in this thing together, and to the extent that we can come to a better understanding of it, the better we're going to be. And we're going to help the Jews understand that you're just like the rest of us. Roll up your sleeves and join in with the people in the destruction of colonialism. And that means joining under the leadership of the Palestinian people that say that Israel must go. Is not a statement about Jews must go. It's about a state. Israel is a state. It was an artificial entity that's imposed on Palestine, and Palestine cannot be free as long as there's an Israel. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman Uhuru, and really want to salute just this profound discussion, and you, Chairman, for deepening, this analysis, and, just everything that you're saying is just right on point, and really want to just, again, salute just the profound leadership, and no one's summing it up, like this, and offering up the opportunity to, the colonizer, to Jews, to join the right side of history, to join the struggle against colonialism, which frees up all of humanity, which is something that you summed up, is something that you fought for and brought to the world, and, is even exampled in the existence of the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which of course is represented on this program today. So it's been a very, very powerful discussion so far, and we're going to take some questions and answers from the online viewers. And I want to, just take a moment before going into announcements to say, that what may already be obvious, because, these platforms like YouTube and Facebook are, not platforms that are friendly or open to the anti-colonial, the expression of anti-colonial free speech. And in fact, it would work, over time to ensure that the statements and the position and the analysis that Chairman Amalia Shatella and the African Revolution and the Palestinian Liberation Movement, tries to offer to, the massive people, on the planet are not able to access, this kind of information. And so, even right now being shadow banned and, people being prevented from being able to, engage in this discussion, I just want to really, again, call on the people who are watching this right now, our online audience, to, carry out an active resistance right now by just sharing this and tagging people in the comment section and, bringing people to this discussion and, helping us to fight back against the censorship and to, join in and, liking, Chairman Amalia Shatella's Facebook and Instagram and subscribing to the Burning Spear YouTube channel to get these subscriptions up, to, get the likes and followers up, because this increases the ability of people, seeing these types of presentations, receiving this type of analysis. They don't want the truth out. They do not want, people to be able to have this kind of discussion, because it gets people, to the logical conclusion that, fighting against, any of these different manifestations of colonialism without fighting against the colonial mode of production itself, will become meaningless. We have a responsibility to, recognize the colonial mode of production that's responsible for the misery, that's responsible for the genocide, that's responsible for the plunder and exploitation and humiliation of, masses of people on the planet Earth. That's, the primary primary culprit here. And this is the thing that we have to struggle against. And again, the whole question of, censorship and, banning, anti-colonial free speech. This is why they are attempting to throw Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru 3 in prison, the Uhuru 3, including Jesse Nevel and Comrade Penny Hess. It's the same reason why they are attempting to put 5, students and activists in Tampa, Florida, in jail for 10 years for being able to exercise, their right to anti-colonial speech and protesting, white nationalist regime of Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. I mean, and all these attacks we see, being carried out against, against people who are courageous enough to stand up, to fight back, and even just express at minimum, positions of solidarity, with the struggles of colonized people. This is the struggle that we're up against. And again, really calling on you who are participating in this discussion right now to do everything that's possible to get this discussion out there, to share this analysis with the world, because people need it and they are, desperate for it. They want it, and we have to bring it to them. So again, take this moment to like and share this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, tag your friends and family, your comrades, and bring them into this discussion and say there's no other discussion that's happening that is as important as the one that's happening right now. And I really want to appreciate your participation in carrying this out, and making sure that people can have access to this discussion. So right now we're going to take a look at some announcements before we go into our question and answer section. This is giving you all the up-to-date with the Uhuru movement and different events and how you can get involved. So first is to join the counteroffensive to stop the FBI attacks on the African People's Socialist Party and the African liberation struggle. Drop the charges against the Uhuru 3, sign the petition, sign the emergency response pledge for immediate updates regarding the trial. You can do all of this and more by going to handsoffuhuru.org. And the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Counteroffensive is calling on you to bring your skills, experience, and creativity to this fight back. Go to handsoffuhuru.org/volunteer to see the list of the committees and sign up to volunteer. Build the anti-colonial free speech movement. The Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign stands in full solidarity with the struggle to drop all charges against the Tampa Five, who are facing 5 to 10 years in prison for protesting Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' white nationalist attacks on Black history in public education. We stand with all who are facing repression by the state in this period of escalating attacks on free speech, ushered in by the July 29, 2022 military-style raids, FBI raids on the Uhuru movement and subsequent bogus charges against Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru 3, calling all supporters to come out for the upcoming actions in support of the Tampa Five. The Tampa Five trial is fast approaching, so the upcoming dates include Tuesday, December 5th, at 8 a.m. at the Hills County Courthouse located at 800 East Twig Street. Join the pre-trial hearing rally to defend the Tampa Five. And on Tuesday, December 12th, join the demonstration outside the Edgecombe Courthouse in solidarity with the Tampa Five on the day of their jury selection, marking the beginning of the trial. And starting on December 13th, pack the courthouse during the trial of the Tampa Five. More information can be found at defendthetampafive.org. On Friday, December 8th at 8:30 p.m. UK time, that's 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, 2:30 p.m. Central and 12:30 p.m. Pacific, join the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement for a weekly webinar study titled, "What is Democracy for the African Working Class?" Featuring Secretary General Louise Kinshasa of the African Socialist International. Register for this online study series at tinyurl.com/democracy question. Also on Friday, December 8th at 6 p.m. Pacific time, join the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement for the weekly Reparations Study Group. Bring your copy of The Verdict is in Reparations Now book, the newest book of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. If you do not have, go to the Burning Spirit store. Register for this in-person and virtual study series at tinyurl.com/reparationsstudy. On Saturday, December 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Pacific, the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition presents another event, Antisemitism, a Weapon Against African and Palestinian Freedom Struggle. So continuing on this, the same discussion topic that's being hosted by the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition. So again, that's December 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Join this discussion on how the U.S. and the colonial powers use the charge of anti-Semitism to attack free speech and legitimate political criticism of the settler colonial Israeli state as a means to stifle anti-colonial struggles for Palestinian and African liberation movements and their supporters. You can register at tinyurl.com/Africa-Palestine. And on Sunday, December 10th, from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time, the African National Women's Organization of San Diego hosts the second class of the Political Education and Self-Defense series. Join ANWO at Lindbergh Park for political education and finish the day throwing axes with the Axe Throw Company. For more information, you can visit ANWO Uhuru, that's ANWO, uhuru.org, and click on events. And the December issue of the Burning Spear newspaper is here. Purchase a bundle of 25, 50, 100 or more to sell and mobilize in your community. It is the 55th anniversary of the Burning Spear newspaper, and it has this very dynamic cover celebrating 55 years in print. With the headline, African Nation Declares Gaza, Gaza, Hold the Line, Victory to Palestine. You can get your bundle today at theburningspear.store, and you can order a one-time or recurring bundle. And just a reminder for the Spear that this is the basic day-to-day work of every member of the African People's Socialist Party and African People's Solidarity Committee, an organizer within the Uhuru movement, selling the Burning Spear newspaper. Again, the December issue, holds up this question. The same questions that we're discussing right now in the Sunday study are, articulated in the pages of the Burning Spear newspaper. So get your copy today, again, at theburningspear.store. Every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central Africa time, tune in live for the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa region broadcast. The Africa region of the African People's Socialist Party responds to this attack with a series of programs under the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. Join Uhuru movement leaders Tafari Mugeri, Morlai Conte, and Visto Sabisa, who are making the demand for the FBI and the U.S. government to back off and allow the African People's Socialist Party to advance the course of African people for self-determination. Watch and follow on Facebook at facebook.com/APSP Africa region. And again, make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday study. Uhuru Tours and Speakers Bureau is an institution of the African People's Socialist Party that coordinates events and tours for Chairman Omali Yeshitela and other party speakers and leaders. Book Chairman Omali and other Uhuru movement speakers for your campus or organization now. And to let you know, as you know, January is right around the corner. 2024 is almost here, and that calendar fills up very quickly. So if you want to book Chairman Omali Yeshitela, please email info@uhurutours.com or call 727-914-3621. And for more events not listed here, please go to theburningspear.com/events to see everything happening inside the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party, again, to learn how you can get connected and involved. So that will conclude our announcements for today. And we're going to now take a look at some questions and comments coming in from our online audience. And I want to shout out some of the different locations who are watching with us: Battle Creek, Michigan; Oakland, California; Mount Laurel, New Jersey; Philadelphia, Pennsylvania; Tacoma, Washington; Silver Spring, Maryland; Fort Myers, Florida; San Diego, California; Grenada, West Indies; Chesapeake, Virginia; Lexington, Kentucky; Tampa Bay, Florida; Flossmoor, Illinois; and Louisville, Kentucky have all checked in with us today. Make sure to drop where you are watching from in the chat section so that we can shout out your location. And so thank you, comrades, for tuning in. And let's go ahead and get into our first question. And just to say, Comrade Jesse, you are also, able to, please feel free to participate, in discussion, and comrades, please direct your questions to either of our panelists on today. And I also want to acknowledge some donations to our super chat on YouTube from username Unemployed Scholar, Comrade Sayero, and Comrade Mwezi. Thank you so much for your donations today. And I will continue to shout out donating to the super chat or to PayPal Omali taught me. Yes, Omali taught me. So, and all of that information is in the chat section in terms of how you can contribute to, this study. So thank you so much for those who've made your contributions up to now. And Chairman, I just wanted to take this question that came in from last week as well. We wanted to make sure that we had some questions roll in from last week that we wanted to make sure we were able to take today. And I think this is an important question because it's dealing with the whole question of the anti-colonial free speech movement and these different attacks that have happened as a consequence of the expression of anti-colonial free speech. And that is around the question of Alex Saab. And this came from Comrade Alex Suarez, who's with Revolutionary Alliance, and asked this question last week about how do you think we can free Alex Saab from the empire? So maybe we could just talk a little bit about, Alex Saab, that case and how it, relates to the whole struggle that we're engaged in. Uhuru.
First of all, thank you, Comrade Suarez, for the question. It's an important question, and it is a question that also reflects on a general weakness of the struggle inside the United States. The fact is that the ability to do what they're doing to Alex Suarez to Alex Saab is connected to the ability to do what they're doing to the Uhuru 3 and to the Tampa 5. It's an assault on struggles, and you're talking about the right to free speech, and I think the issue of Saab, does fit into that context. That anything that violates the narrative of the colonial powers is illegal, and so they could take Saab, a Venezuelan diplomat, and actually kidnap him and throw him illegally in prison. And I say illegal based on laws that have been created by the colonial powers themselves. It's an illegal thing that they've done. And the response, of course, is that we have to do everything we can. We have to do the typical traditional stuff by, having demonstrations and mobilization and making sure that the case is on all of our platforms. It has to be recognized. And part of the process of doing that, just as it is about the Uhuru 3, is that we really expose this profound contradiction of a system and a government which, on the one hand, proclaims itself to be the arbingers of the holding up and advancing struggles of freedom and free speech, et cetera, are doing just the opposite. So it is a contradiction that, when really truly brought to the surface in a most dynamic way, especially during a time like this when crisis abounds throughout the system, where there are all kinds of cross currents of contradictions and struggles and interests being made manifest. I just think it's really important to hold these cases up like that. But the critical thing is for us to build organization on the ground. That's not just about defending against this crime or that crime, but identifying and recognizing with the work that we do, the organization that we build, the relationships that we have, that we are dealing with a social system that has no redeeming qualities, and that the ability ultimately of the people to be free is to build freedom movements and to unite with the colonized people organization, structurally doing everything that we can to make sure that the struggle against the social system itself gets stronger, so that we can disappear the social system and not just find ourselves forever and perpetually fighting against systems, which is symptoms, which is what our oppressors would have us to do. So, Comrade Alex, I think that one of the reasons that the Uhuru movement came under assault is because we were not just talking about exposing contradictions by having protests and things like that, but actually engage in struggle to change the relationship that African people practically on the ground materially have with the social system itself, negating colonialism itself with all the work that we do. And the struggle for free speech has to be something that's designed to negate the influence and power of colonialism. And so hopefully that was not too. That answer, that response, Comrade Alex, was not too was not too obscure. I do think we have to do everything we can, put it on our agenda, expose the world, write about it, talk about it, let everybody know about it, and which is really important during this time. But I think the bigger thing that we have to do is to build a revolutionary organization, to build and to establish relationship and supporting anti-colonial organization movement, not just the concept, but the actual organizations. So, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much for taking this question and, bringing more attention to these different struggles that are happening as a part of the same contradiction that we're struggling and organizing against. This is how we, free Alex Saab. We build the anti-colonial free speech movement. We push back against these state attacks, that are responsible for the arrests and the imprisonment and, the attacks being made on the people who are just righteously struggling for their freedom. And that, again, was Comrade Alex Suarez with the question. So thank you, Comrade Alex, for that.
Comrade Alex Suarez has been one who's been on the front lines of this struggle around the anti-colonial free speech movement as well. So, Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. And I just wanted to acknowledge some other locations that checked in with us: Gainesville, Florida, Queens, New York, and Namibia. In Southern Africa, Comrade Visto checked in with us, Uhuru, comrade. So our next question, and I want to take this comment from Hamza Ali, and believe is located in might be San Diego, California, but she's Iraqi. And she made the comment that I thought was important, and maybe we would want to discuss it here, that Arabs cannot be anti-Semitic because we are Semitic just like Jews. And I've heard that, before, and also was, having this discussion, I believe, with Comrade Jesse about how, Africans who are Jews, and the treatment of Africans, by colonizer, Jews, and just how this continues to expose the relationship of the fact that it's, colonizer and colonized, and that Jews are people, and that, this is the colonial mode of production is the thing that, it creates, all of this, these contradictions, and was responsible for, the Holocaust even inside Germany. So those are just, I'm kind of rambling on, but just these central points that I think are connected to this. And I don't know, Chairman or Comrade Jesse, if you wanted to speak to that, but that was Comrade Hamza.
Uhuru. Well, first of all, I just really want to appreciate the study and your presentation, Chairman, which was so brilliant and really, really inspiring and powerful, and just something that I want to get out to the world and expose millions of other Jewish people to that message, and win people into APSC and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So I just really want to salute the presentation. And yeah, I appreciate the question. It is true. Anti-Semitism is a complete misnomer. I haven't myself researched when they started using that term, but of course it is inaccurate. Arabs are Semites. Many other people are considered Semitic peoples. So it's a term that's used falsely to refer to basically what they mean is anti-Jewish. And even that, I think really they mean anti-European Jews, because I don't think most of the time when people say anti-Semitism, I don't think they have African Jews from Ethiopia in mind. And as Director Akile stated, it's also true that in the so-called State of Israel, there are African Jews who were actually airlifted from Ethiopia in the 80s by the State of Israel in a very interventionist kind of thing that the State of Israel was involved in Africa. And they did that as part of an effort that the State of Israel has been involved in, a struggle to maintain a Jewish majority. So they actually, even in the 1950s, facilitated a plan to force the immigration of Arab Jews into the State of Israel, who were also treated completely differently than the European white Jews who created the State of Israel. And they created this term, the Mizrahi Jews, which actually means the Oriental ones, or the Eastern Jews. Yes, we've seen in the past 10 years or so that there have actually been major demonstrations of African Jews in the state of Israel against the Israeli government for the police murder of African Jews by the state of Israel, the forced sterilization, having birth control imposed on African women from Ethiopia living in the state of Israel, being put in detention camps, and even African Jews who are forced to enlist in the Israeli military. There's statistics that say that 40% of African Jews who are in the Israeli military will see the inside of a military prison before their service, if you will, is up. So it reinforces the statement that the chairman has always made, that the state of Israel, they call it the Jewish state, but it's a white nationalist colonial settler state, no different from the state of the United States, or from Australia or New Zealand or South Africa, or what was Rhodesia, or any other white nationalist colonial settler state. And I just want to really appreciate the powerful statement that the chairman made to Jewish people, that that we can turn against the bourgeoisie, we can turn against our own bourgeoisie, and that we don't have to see the same fate of the Zionist project and of the colonial mode of production. And that's such a powerful and winning message that you present, Chairman. And and also just want to unite with what you raise about this whole notion of the chosen people, and that Jews are people, and that Jews are subject to the same laws of social development as all other people. And that forces us to look at the fact that the role of white Jews in this country, that before many Jews ended up going to Palestine to participate in that colonial settler project, most Jews fleeing persecution in Europe from the 1800s on came to this colonial settler project, the United States, and found a better way of life, the way all white people leaving behind conditions in Europe and looking for a better way of life found it in this country, which is through stepping on the backs of African people, participating in the oppression of African people, and through the stolen land and genocide of the indigenous people. There's a book out right now called The Cost of Free Land, about all of the thousands of Jews who came from Russia and Germany in the late 1800s and participated in what they called the Homestead Act, where they were given 180 acres of land each in South Dakota that belonged to the Lakota people and had been violently expropriated from the Lakota people, and was then given to millions of white people that included Jews. Jews participated in that. And the chairman has talked about the role of parasitic merchants in the African community, Jewish business owners who would go in and open up businesses and extract wealth and resources from African people, go back to their own neighborhoods, and ultimately enable them to ascend from relative poverty to wealth within the span of one generation by stepping on the backs of African people. So this is the reality that we have to look at when we actually embrace this understanding of the colonial mode of production and a materialist worldview of Jews. And even this notion that Jews are the chosen people to whom God gave the land of Palestine 2,000 years ago is no different from the concept of manifest destiny. It's no different. That is just an age-old trope, as the chairman says, within the colonial ideology, that it belongs to the white people because God gave it to us. And this is just a new iteration of that, or that they've used to justify the state of Israel. So I really appreciate this discussion and the chairman's analysis. And the last thing I wanted to say, Chairman, the point that you made, that it really is so resonant and powerful, that the Jewish people don't have to die with the bourgeoisie and with the state of Israel, with the Zionist colonial settler state, that we can join with the Palestinians, including in Israel. We're talking about Jews in Israel can join with the Palestinians in building a world without Israel, without Zionism, without colonialism. And it reminded me of an interview I saw recently. It was an old interview with Leila Khaled, who was an important figure in the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And the interviewer asked her, what about the Jews, in Palestine? Once Israel is defeated, what's going to happen to the Jewish people who live here? And she said, well, they can live with us peacefully, or they can get the hell out. And it's really that simple. Uhuru.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think that just a couple of things. One, this thing that with Ethiopia, this might have been the 80s when they did this massive airlift of Africans from Ethiopia into Israel. Part of that was a propaganda ploy.
Yes.
I mean, they have always needed to have a number of Jews, to justify being able to occupy the territory, because the Jews have been a minority for a longer period of time. That's one of the reasons they're afraid to allow the Palestinian people to come back to their homeland. So it was a big ploy. Yeah. And it was something that was seen as a plus, because you had these white people who were rescuing the poor Africans in Ethiopia and bringing them there. It didn't tell the stories about how they even had separate blood banks, separate places for African blood and blood banks, and just did the typical old white nationalist kind of stuff. And I think it's important because some people want to rely on the example of reparations to Jews for how African people will achieve reparations in the United States and other places. But what must really be understood is that the reparations to Jews, what it did was allow for massive placement of all kinds of resources, money, to the illegitimate white nationalist state for the purpose of growing that state at the expense of Palestinians. It was a war. Part of the war against Palestine was what they call reparations, that went to Jews. So you had, coming from the national budgets of Germany and perhaps some other places, all these resources, but they were there to build an Israel at the expense of the Palestinian people. So it was a reparations that was based on making war against Palestine. I think it's really important. And then finally, I want to say that one thing that we have to do, and this is our biggest, most insignificant weapon, is that we have to raise up the question of Black people, Africans. Like this whole thing about anti-Semitism and what have you, we have to challenge Zionism, with the condition of African people. I mean, I have lived in cities, for example, St. Petersburg, Florida, been one, where you have this huge, what they call it, Holocaust museum. But even before this event began, we were off air talking to Comrade Akile about, the history right there, just in St. Petersburg alone, in terms of the murder of African people. There's no museum there.
Right.
There's no museum in most of the places. And the fact is that the majority of the people who were killed on this land were not Jews. They were indigenous people. Yep. They were African people who were murdered and things like that. But there's nothing that memorializes that as a horror, as an affront to humanity, or something to that effect. And so you have this affront to humanity that is only something that's recognized for Jews. And when you look at this affront to humanity, the examples they give are never the so-called Ethiopian Jews, never the Jews from Morocco and places like that who created the Black Panther organization in occupied Palestine called Israel. Never that. It's always the white people. And I think we have to say it, that Israel is a white nationalist state. It's a white state, and that is something that's being used to obscure the oppression against African people. I wish Susan Sarandon had been able to say, perhaps what Jews have been experiencing is something that African people have lived with since the very beginning of our relationship to this country and to most of what is characterized as the Western Hemisphere. This has been our reality forever. And it's been one that's ignored and beneficial to white people and all the white people, including the Jews who were disliked. There's a history of dislike of Jews in Europe.
throughout. And some of that history has been transferred to African people. Some of it, like the ideological stuff about Jews, etc., that came from white people.
Right.
This is stuff that white people created, not African people, etc. And so I just think it's really important to raise up the African question. Those of us who are really interested in smashing, destroying this notion of the morality of horrors committed by the Zionists against Palestinians and other people and against Black people in this country, have to raise up the history of Black people in this country. And it's a weakness of what characterizes itself as the left and anti-imperialists. They can't do that.
Right.
They won't do that. They won't say that, look at the indigenous people, look at the concentration camp, look at the cages on the borders right now. And you can say anything you want to about a Mexican. You can say anything you want to about indigenous people. You can say anything you want to about a Muslim or an Arab, generally speaking. But this whole Zionist thing has created a protected species, a protected group that cannot be criticized, because to criticize it is to criticize the essence of the colonial mode of production. So, Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrades, Chairman and Jesse, thank you so much for, again, continuing to deepen, this discussion and bringing us back to the central question of the colonial mode of production. And speaking of which, I wanted to take this question. It's related to the topic as it regards the colonial mode of production. This was submitted last week and resubmitted here by Comrade Lewis on YouTube, who said, "Salute to the African People's Socialist Party and the chairman." And the question is, what efforts can we make to strengthen international trade unions and international labor unions as a force to dismantle and control the colonial mode of production? So again, that's Comrade Lewis on YouTube. This question was raised last week in last week's study, Chairman. So.
I think it's a really important question, because what has happened with trade unions is a certain kind of economism. That the trade unions have been relegated to by the so-called left, et cetera, just fighting for better wages and better conditions and things like that. When the fact is there's a real contest that happens between labor and the colonial bourgeoisie, or the bourgeoisie in general. And that is a contest that's been made for the value of stolen labor. That's the whole capitalist system rests upon a foundation of the theft of labor from the people who do from the producers, who are the workers, the toilers, et cetera. And this is a system that got its founding from stolen labor and resources, being enslaved the African people, enslaved indigenous people in this hemisphere and other places, et cetera. And this is something that reverberates throughout the whole system. And labor unions came into existence to get a better deal for the workers. But in the final analysis, the ultimate aim that has to be fought for is that the working class has become the ruling class. And that is the only way, because the actual socialized ownership of the means of production. Some people confuse that question with nationalization. If you have nationalization, that somehow you got something that approximates socialism, which is not the case at all. In fact, the whole question of nationalization, you're still talking about the state having ownership. And depending on what class controls the state, then you're talking about who has ownership. And the bourgeoisie, the colonial bourgeoisie, controls the state. So what has to happen is that we have to really become much more active. And at one juncture, the African People's Socialist Party had moved to create an African internationalist labor union. And we had forces in Africa, South Africa in particular, and some other places, because we wanted to organize all of the colonized African workers. And that would be people who in what is called informal production as well, not just because that's where I believe a tremendous, perhaps even the majority of Africans who produce involved in what they characterize as informal production. It's not, in many instances, production that we create for ourselves. And we talk about the market women, et cetera. This is such a profoundly significant sector of production. And if Africans were organized from trade unions, from the labor unions at the ports of Oakland, and that's been a really militant and progressive sector of the fight back to again the market women, right there in the crop. You're talking about a really powerful capacity to determine how the economy of this whole colonial mode of production will function and whether it can exist. I mean, the cocoa producers, the children who do that, the children and other miners who are bringing up the resources from coltan and from cobalt and all these other things. So I think that we have to do that. And I hope that the person who's raising the question is somebody who's interested in helping to facilitate the development of a genuine revolutionary union. The political leadership of the workers has to be a revolutionary political party with the objective not only to improve conditions, not only to make that struggle within the existing mode of production in terms of capturing much of the stolen wealth, but the role of what has to happen is that the working class has to become the new ruling class. And for that to happen, the working class has to have its own party that's engaged not just in what they characterize as economic activity, but the political activity to replace this social system with a new social system that puts the workers in power. Uhuru.
Uhuru Chairman, and Uhuru, Comrade Lewis, thank you so much for your question. And while we have just a couple of minutes left before going into our closing remarks section, we might be able to get 2 more questions in, we'll see. So we have one from username New Africa on YouTube who says, Uhuru Chairman, the late ancestor Francis Cress Wesling said that the phases of colonialism is establishment, maintenance, expansion, and refinement. Do you believe that Israel's new assault is to reach that refinement phase?
Well, I don't know. I think Israel, this is the problem with colonialism generally. And first of all, I want to distinguish colonialism as a policy of a particular state or a particular government from colonialism as a mode of production. When Portugal first struck out to go into Africa, it was based on a policy determination that was made by Portugal and perhaps, what's this guy's name? The navigator, Prince Henry, the navigator, etc. But it soon became more than just a policy. It became a mode of production. It became the means by which, the method by which all production occurred, not just for Portugal, but throughout the whole world. And so it functions that way. It has to function that way for its own survival. And so what we see is that it's a shaky proposition. When you have a social system built, constructed on the oppression of whole peoples, peoples are always going to be fighting back to try to take their freedom. It's always a state of crisis. And sometimes if the oppressor, especially in a settler entity, settler colonialism can only work if you can exterminate the entire population. If the entire population is not exterminated, which is something that you hear said all the time, exterminate the brutes, exterminate the vermin, exterminate, because those who are oppressed are always going to try to be free. And they don't have to be, ideological to want to be free. They want to eat, they want to feed their children, they want to live in dignity. They want to know that their children and family can have some kind of security. People try to make that happen. And that puts the system in a state of crisis all the time. And so whether or not Israel, the illegitimate white nationalist state of Israel, is at some stage of colonialism, as put forth by Dr. Francis Wells Crescent, I can't say, I can't speak to that. I can only say that the system is in a perpetual state of crisis, and that regardless of whether or not it's in this stage or that stage, the whole colonial mode of production has to be destroyed, and whatever stage it's in will go with it. So, I mean, I think that I'm not dismissing, please don't understand me as somebody who's dismissing the significance of having a scientific approach. I've tried to suggest a scientific approach to the whole question of colonialism so that we don't get fixated with with just one place, but understand that we're looking at a colonial mode of production, and you see various iterations of this throughout the world. So I have not studied what Dr. Crescent Welch has said on this question, and perhaps you know better than I on this issue. But I do want to say again that the responsibility of the colonized, and not just the colonized, I want to make this point really clear too, because we mentioned how this thing, what you see Jews experience in the 1940s is a consequence of colonialism, the colonial mode of production. That's who taught the capitalists how to act. Right. People talking about the capitalists act this way, that way. Usually they don't treat white people like that because the colonized have always been identified as somebody else, the others. But now, and we see even people who would say they're fighting against fascism, this extreme expression of capitalism, but it ain't extreme. The fact of the matter is, if you look at what, even as people were fighting against fascism in the 30s and 40s and et cetera, and later on, it was pale in comparison to what was happening to colonized people. When we look at the description of even what's been defined as genocide against Jews, how does that compare with the 11, 12, 15 million Africans killed just in Congo alone? How does that compare with the assault on an entire continent, 15,000 square miles of nothing but wealth and resources, and the murder and brutality that the people are still suffering from even now, as long as this system articulates itself? So it's a mode of production that we're looking at, and this is the thing that we fight for and try to help people recognize. So again, this is not an effort to dismiss or undermine whatever science that somebody tries to bring to the discussion. It's an effort to contribute our view of what that science should look like. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, and Uhuru, comrade, username New Africa on YouTube. Thank you, Chairman. And, just what you just said just now reminds me of, several statements that you made, not just in this discussion, but, overall, just how the whole question of the colonial mode of production is the central question. It's locked the whole world into this process, and how every time we see like world crisis emerge, it's as a consequence of the colonized rising up in some part of the world. It's, the colonized resisting colonialism, and just reminds me of that, of how you say there is no peaceful coexistence, could never be a peaceful coexistence where there is a colonized and a colonizer, that one exists at the expense of the other, and one has a responsibility to, get rid of it, in order to know peace and prosperity. So just really, really want to appreciate that. And that question. We have just a couple of minutes here. I wanted to recognize Comrade John Hill Jr. In NYC with the People's Radio on WBAI, tuned in with us today. Thank you, Comrade John. It's all, and normally on the study is with us. So we just really want to salute you and for being on today. This last question we're going to take is from username Fudo on YouTube. And the question is, Uhuru, are the conditions occurring in West Africa up for discussion? And for instance, are the leaders of the countries that make up ECOWAS, would they be for African internationalism or more for an Islamic revolution? This is the question, Chairman.
Uhuru, thank you. ECOWAS, that's the economic community, West Africa, yeah. And no, they wouldn't be for African internationalism. They wouldn't be for Palestinians either. They would be for whatever the white man tells them to be for. Mm-hmm. In the final analysis, you're looking at a colonial entity that's already lined up and preparing to make struggle against the temerity of the forces in places like Mali and in Niger and Burkina Faso, who trying to push the French out. So they wouldn't be for that. The revolution is going to happen throughout the continent of Africa on every front, and the toiling masses, the workers. We have our own party now in the form of the African Socialist International that exists in some of the places in Africa. Our objective is to get rid of all those creeps, all of those forces who function as puppets, as tools of
of our oppressors who stand between them and the colonized masses of our people. Comrade Fudo, the ECOWAS does not stand could not be African International, nor do they stand with the Palestinians people. Mm-hmm. They never will. And all of those structures are going to have to come down. We are going to have to rebuild the African Socialist Internationals working to try to build our party among the toilers, the workers, masses of the people, certainly with under the leadership of the workers, et cetera, to destroy all of those manifestations of indirect rule, which is what neo-colonialism is, indirect rule as well as direct colonial powers that's existed most prominently up until recently.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Comrade Fudo, for your question, and to our live viewers for your contributions to this discussion with your questions and comments. Really, really appreciate them, and we are winding down in time, so for the other questions, we will be able to address them in our next study, which will be a continuation around this discussion, and with a different theme, but similar type of discussion we'll be able to have next week. So we'll be able to take those questions as well. So thank you again for your participation, and also for participating in sharing and subscribing and tagging your friends, and again, increasing the accessibility of this discussion to masses of people. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Comrade Jesse, and then following, we'll have the chairman for closing remarks. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Well, I just really want to thank Omali Taught Me, and thank you, Director Akile, and salute the profound leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and this really incredible discussion. It was an honor to participate, and I will make sure that we get these submitted for the official announcements for next week's study. But I did want to mention that you can go to uhurusolidarity.org, and within the next day or so, you will be able to find information about an event that the African People's Solidarity Committee will be hosting on Wednesday, December 27th at 6:30 p.m. Central, with the theme Jews Against Colonialism, where we will be discussing the creation of a working group of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement to organize and recruit Jews who want to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people by standing in anti-colonial solidarity with the African Revolution and the struggle to overturn the colonial mode of production and fight for reparations to African people as a revolutionary demand. So that will be made available in the coming days, and also we'll make sure to submit it for next week. And also that on March 9th and 10th, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement will be hosting our annual national convention. And this year, we are using a theme that was popularized by the Uhuru movement and the African People's Solidarity Committee going back decades, which is No More Genocide in Our Name. So I just wanted to mention those two important upcoming events for any white people who were moved by the discussion today and want to join in solidarity with this anti-colonial struggle of the African Revolution, which is winning, which will win. Colonialism will go, and there will be a world without exploitation and oppression. And we have the opportunity, the responsibility to fight to be a part of it and to do our role to fight for reparations and solidarity with the anti-colonial struggles of African, Palestinian, indigenous, and all oppressed and colonized peoples around the world. So thank you again. Thank you to the Department of Agitprop, and above all to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Comrade Jesse, and we will be excited to feature those announcements in our next week's study, and also you'll be able to check that out also on the burningspear.com/events page as well when that gets uploaded. So thank you so much for your participation in this study, and just again that profound analysis informed by African internationalism, and the call for white people, Jews, to get on the right side of the question, get on the right side of history, and to join and participate in the anti-colonial freedom struggle under the leadership of African, Palestinian, and colonized people. And now we'll turn it over to our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, for your closing remarks.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Comrade Director Akile. And I want to again just salute all of the members of the African People's Socialist Party, and the Uhuru movement stretched across the globe. And to say that what gives greater significance to this and the other studies that we're doing is that they're not happening in some rarefied situation of universities, things like that, although one comrade did characterize the study as our own university. Mm-hmm. Our objective is to create working class intellectuals, if you will. We function where you are, Comrade Akile, in St. Petersburg, Florida, the Uhuru House that came under attack there on July 29th of last year. Where I am right now, the Uhuru House in St. Louis, in the heart of the most economically depressed sector of the African population. The same thing is true in the townships of South Africa. We are there. We are in some of the most impoverished sectors of the African population in Liberia. You've seen the people, you've seen some of the photos that we've shown coming from the November 4th mobilizations that we've done there, where people walk for 8 miles on November 4th, part of the Black People's March on the White House there in Sierra Leone. And you've seen the impoverished people there. You've seen them in places like Liberia, et cetera. This is where we take these studies. These are not just studies that happen on universities. They happen every place we can make them happen, especially among the African working class that now has its own party. We make them and go as deep as we can into the African working class, but we've done more than that. One of the reasons we've been able to survive up to now is, as you've heard, the brilliant presentation that comes from Comrade Jesse Nevel, and at different times you've heard other representatives, leaders of the African People's Solidarity Committee or Uhuru Solidarity Movement, is because this party of the African working class that now has its own revolutionary organization globally has been able to extend the struggle of our people beyond just our community, beyond just the borders that have been created for us by our oppressors, and to various other places around the world, and certainly throughout Africa. And we see that happen, opening up new fronts in the white community, among the colonizers, eroding this colonial solidarity, the total and absolute colonial solidarity. This is what we're calling on white people, Jews, to do in terms of separating themselves from a bourgeoisie that would have them participating in mass murder. That's what we've done here with the marches against genocide. That started before we didn't even have Jews in mind about this, but giving the settlers, giving the colonizers an opportunity to separate themselves from the murder that's being visited upon the vast majority of the people, and to unite with the struggles of the oppressed. That's what this study is about. That's what we are doing. This is what it is meant to create the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement that exists throughout various places around the world. We're a small organization, but the fact is that we are taking this discussion, this understanding, we are deepening the revolutionary consciousness and understanding of African people in the most severely oppressed and economically depressed sectors of the African community. And then, of course, to unite all of this, we've worked to build the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. So this is not just a minor discussion that we're having here today. It is a part of a process that we have been utilizing to take revolutionary consciousness and ideology and struggle to the masses of African people themselves, and especially to the workers and most oppressed sectors of our population. So I want to thank you, Comrade Akile, and I want to call on everybody who's participating in this study. You have to help us break out of this encirclement, that has been imposed on us by the bourgeoisie, by Zuckerberg and all the others who say we're not supposed to be able to talk to anybody else, by people who wake us up in the morning at 5 o'clock with flashbang grenades and armed terrorists because they don't like what we're saying. You have to help us break out of this, and by sharing and doing all the kinds of clever things that people who are involved in the tech sector of our movement tell us must happen, so more and more people can participate in this discussion and see us. And I just finally need to say that the right to free speech does not involve simply shutting me up.
from me talking, but it also involves making it impossible for you to hear what I got to say. And that's the critical thing that we must understand. So it's an assault on you, whether you had ever thought about saying what I'm talking about, but you never will get a chance to hear what I'm talking about, which means that they can control every discussion that we have, help us to get the word out. Thank you so much. Thank you, Comrade Director Akile. Thank you, brothers and sisters and comrades everywhere. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Uhuru, Chairman, Uhuru, Comrade Jesse, and Uhuru to all of you who are watching, tuned in with us today. I just again want to express my appreciation and salute the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, this incredible program, and as well as the Omali Taught Me Show team for helping with the entire production, the promotions, the development, the AV, and the chat moderation, this whole powerful powerhouse here that we have, behind Omali Taught Me. So really, it's salute all of you. And again, thank you for tuning in to the study. And whether you were watching on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter, we're glad to have you on with us. We want to echo the call that you must help us break out of this encirclement, break out of, this censorship, this direct attack on your right to have access to this information, to be able to see the world the way it actually is. And, that is what you are being denied when they attack Chairman Omali Yeshitela, when they attack the Uhuru 3 and the African Liberation Movement and, attempt to silence these studies right here. They're attacking your right, as Chairman said, to this information. So thank you so much in your participation. Make sure you follow the chairman on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and Instagram, and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Uhuru.
Uhuru.